Hello. I've got the go-ahead to start the session, so I think we're going to commence. For those of you that know Amy Buono, you will know that I am not her, and she is not able to be here with us. My name is Sherrie Smith-Ferri, and I'm an enrolled member at Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians in Sonoma County. I've worked in the museum field for a number of years and recently retired. And now I'm actually busier than I've ever been being TIPO, which is a Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for Dry Creek Rancheria, and working on some consulting gigs. So that's enough about me. And I did give a little bit of a tutorial on how to move the slides, so hopefully it worked. So I'm just taking this opportunity to introduce you to really what I think is one of the world's finest art forms, which is California Indian feathered art. And this is my particular bugaboo. I think very few people know about Native California, even people that live in California. I would say the casinos have done more for us to raise our level of recognition than anything else, which is an interesting kind of take on the world. Probably the best known feathered art form is our feathered baskets. And for those of you that know me, you know that baskets are my particular passion. So this is where I'm starting. And while there is a kind of overall perception that it's Pomo Indian feathered baskets, really there was a number of tribes around the Bay Area that made feathered baskets. But I'm going to look at the Pomo ones. So for those of you that aren't sort of basketry people, this is a coiled basket. So one of the main forms of construction techniques, a 3-rod coiled basket. And the color comes from actually the weaver harvesting the bird and then essentially painting with feathers. So you have to take the feathers from the skins of the birds in kind of the order that they're on the skin. So they, this is where the bird scientists would be helpful in terms of vocabulary. I just know they kind of have this sort of laid down like shingles in kind of rows that overlap. And one of the weavers, older weavers I worked with, put it very well. She said, if you don't know what you're doing when you make these baskets, they can look like a cat who's angry. And all of they all sort of stick up. And what you really want is for them to look like the breast of a bird, very smooth, lay flat. And I should say that these baskets, again, you can see more examples of feathered baskets, Pomo feather baskets. They're meant to be viewed, they're meant to hang. So you can see the one that's the red, it has this handle. They all have these handles. They're meant to be suspended. And in a sense, they're more like mobiles, when you hang them, because all of the pattern and the color is kind of on the outside surface and on the bottom. And when you hang them, they spin. They'll sort of slowly turn. And they have these kind of dangles you'll see that are made of shell beads or glass beads with abalone pendant shells sort of formed on the end. And they have people that are wondering what those kind of white round things are. Those are clamshell disbeats. And it's a form of money. So it'd be like if you're putting silver dollars on your basket. So they're ornamented. They're meant to be items of wealth and beauty. Their use, their function is essentially social and in some cases ceremonial. They're not really meant to do much besides be admired. And one of my particular pet peeves in seeing feather baskets displayed is usually people just plop them upside down, which means that it totally ruins the experience of how they're supposed to be. So the one on the top is plopped upside down, so all its dangles just sort of are around the edge. You don't get to see it move. It's just wrong. So for all of those of you in museums that have these in your collections, don't do that. There's also feather baskets that are what we call spot feathered. So it's like little pieces, little sort of tufts of feathering, and often they're usually done with the acorn woodpecker, which has this kind of very iridescent red sort of part of its head on the top. You take little tufts of those feathers, and you're actually weaving these feathers into the fabric of the basket. You can't pull it out. It is intrinsically into that basket. And so this is, again, this example of kind of incorporating design with the different colored basketry materials, incorporating, that pops of color from both in the glass beads, the clamshell disc beads, the projecting kind of feathers. Those are California quail top knots, the kind of especially the men that have, the male birds that have those sort of standing up feathers. Yeah. And again, you can see this red, white, black kind of is a very common kind of color scheme. But you're also going to see other kinds of feathers used that way too. And so a lot of times in the beginning, as I said, those were made for gifts. We loved baskets. We still love baskets, What an amazing gift at special occasions in life, like marriages. The other thing that, like I said, some of these were used in ceremony, but they became very popular on the basket market that happened late 1800s, early 1900s. All of these kinds of American Indian arts and crafts were popularized, often as a kind of home decor, and collectors started, competing with each other to have the most beautiful baskets. Of course, these feathered baskets became something that was really highly sought after. So almost all the baskets, feather baskets in museum collections in America are usually those kinds of baskets. And just a look at some of the birds. So we talked about the California quail, the western bluebird, that blue color. That is the acorn woodpecker, who is very kindly showing you what it does. And that's the red on top of its head. And then a male mallard duck, and we'll use the green, that sort of iridescent green from its head, and the brown from its kind of chest. Some more of the feathers that get used. Golden eagle, the tanager, the oriole, and flicker, western flicker. One of the things I wanted to talk about is all of this feather work is, in a sense, a collaboration between these beings and the artists and the people that are using that art. And so all the feathers are harvested, the animals are harvested. You always ask permission, and you tell the being that it's going to have a life. You're taking its life now, but it's going to have a life that goes on into the future. It's going to live in a new form. It's going to be very beautiful. It's going to be loved. And there's this sense of the bird giving you that gift that needs to be honored of its life. So this is a painting by, actually, I shouldn't say it's a painting, it's a finger doodle. It's done with digital art, drawn on a phone and filled in by a friend of mine, Mio Marufo, who's an artist who the flicker is sort of giving its feathers there. So showing you some other different kinds of California Indian feathered art that you might not be as familiar with. And a number of these are things that you could call luxuries or luxury items or, beautiful adornments. So one of these is these, what we call ear sticks. It's a very long, big, showy earrings. And both men and women wore them. And this is, I should say that basically pretty much all the California Indian art I'm showing in this is from Central California and maybe a little bit further south. And I think Bradley's going to be talking about Northwest California. So I didn't want to steal your thunder, Bradley. So this is actually a set of Pomo ear sticks. And you could see the center red medallion. That's essentially a little basket disc. And so those are, again, the red feathers from the acorn woodpecker woven in, and then it's surrounded by this kind of halo of California quail feathers. And then it has these dangles of clamshell disc beads, magnesite, abalone. And when you wear them, and that's why I wanted to be able to show you, this is a Curtis photograph of somebody wearing these exact ear sticks. And they're made so the bone there, that long white thing, is a heron leg bone that's been incised with all of these really delicate kind of scrimshaw-like patterns. And so you have those, and there's a hollow, it's hollow inside, so there's this cordage that you see at the top that runs down through the tube, and it attaches to the basket disc. So when you wear them, they dangle and they turn. And that's part of what they're designed to do. So much of the feather work is like this. It's really meant to be into movement, in movement, to catch the light, to just like you were seeing in the little film of the bowerbird, it's meant to be beautifully attractive. This one is for Ellen because this is from the Brooklyn Museum collection. And you could probably tell us all about this, but it's a mighty feather belt. So a piece of ceremonial regalia, and it's hard to pick up in this slide, but that is the mallard. So it's that kind of green iridescence that gets sort of black too. So it's very Christmassy, green, red, white. And these feathers are being, again, sort of woven into, this isn't a basket per se, but it's very much like a basket. It's a textile, except this is flexible. And those tufts of feathers are again woven into the fabric there of the textile. And this is William Benson, a Pomo artist, who is making one of those feather belts. And he's using a loom to do that. This is kind of a new invention. A lot of these are sort of more, it was a little simpler how they did it earlier. So I had the privilege, really, of going to Russia, and Russia has in St. Petersburg, thanks to the Peter the Great Museum, has the earliest large collection of California Indian material from really all of California. The Russians got around. And I'm so glad I did that, because really all of this is now unavailable and probably will be for a long time. But this is a feather cape. This is from the San Francisco Bay Area. I've seen a few of these. They've all been in European collections. So it was, usually you could see how big this cape is, and it's double-sided. Again, if you look in the middle of that photo, you can see some of the, it's a textile, and again, those feathers are woven into it, and on both sides. It gives you a picture of the enormity of amount of birds that are in this, gives you a picture of the abundance of, especially this is all waterfowl feathers, gives you a picture of the abundance of life, in our skies, in our waters, that just isn't here anymore. It's in some ways really sad to see these, because I know that. They're just so light, so warm, so soft, really, really beautiful. They're these sort of nice sand colors, gray colors, creamy colors, all blended together. And you can see that it would just be a fabulous thing to have on nice foggy mornings like we had today, to wrap yourself in this. And it took an enormous amount of time. I think it gives you a picture, too, into the window of California Indian life, where, Native peoples in California, I'm very prejudiced, but I truly believe that we lived in one of the best places in the world, in terms of a world that took care of us and had an abundance of resources. And so a lot of time wasn't spent, much less time was spent than people think in terms of, like, getting the food you need to survive. We spent a lot of time in art. We had that time, and we enjoyed doing it. So I think you see this. I should also say that Russia, because it was cut off from the West for so long, doesn't have much of an idea of California Indian material and California Indian life. So there's some real mistakes. This is from one of their mannequins. She's wearing a dance head net, which would never be right, and she's wearing a man's dance necklace, which again, not right. There's sort of things about it. This is from their collections there. It's enormously long. It's kind of like a feather boa. It's, again, feathered all the way around with this woven into this cordage. I have never seen anything like it. I've never heard about anything like it. No, you do. It's probably gathered from the Bay Area, and it's labeled as a headband, but can't be, so there you have it. These are early illustrations of, and there's lots of these kinds of illustrations out there of non-native people, the first kind of non-native peoples coming into native California and making drawings, illustrations of native California people, and you see all these just fascinating and different kinds of feather regalia. You can see these are Coast Miwok men, what they're wearing on their heads. all of those kind of feather skirts and belts and headdresses, and you just can start to get a sense of the diversity and the use of feathers in so many different ways. And then some of that was just, again, adornment. Some of that was used in ceremony. We're back in Russia again. So this is a condor cape. And I know Bradley will talk about condors, so I'll leave that to you. But you get a sense of the drama and the kind of the magnificence and the relationship. And probably from Central to Southern California. And the gentleman on the end is wearing this all-enveloping kind of cape that's made out of raven feathers and a headdress. And again, you get the idea of how dramatic these are. Man's dance skirt. This is, the inside and the outside. This is from Russia again, because it's made from condor feathers on the bottom and golden eagle feathers on the top row, to give you an idea of its size. And the inside is netted, and that, kind of the shaft of the feather is, you sort of slit it and you tuck the end in around that loop of cordage, so it makes this nice little neat package. And that's how they hang there. And again, you really need to see these things danced because of the way they move and how the dancer uses that. They'll flick it up, they'll sway from side to side. There's just nothing like seeing the real thing. But it is really constructed to do that. All sorts. I wanted to talk about regalia as, we call them outfits. So you have a man's dance outfit and a woman's dance outfit, and it's made up to be complete. It's made up of all these different pieces. So one of those for a man would be that feather cape or skirt. You have feather dance wands of all different kinds, and you could see how you're holding it, and these are some examples. Again, from Brooklyn, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And then there's a flicker headband, and you have a really beautiful close-up on your program of a flicker dance headband. Those are all, you're just using the shaft of flicker feather that's colored orange. And there's a subspecies, I think it is, but there's something we call a yellow hammer, which is a golden shafted flicker, but it's much less common. But you can see the hundreds, if not thousands, of birds that you'll need to harvest to make some of these flicker feather bands will start from the top of somebody's head and go all the way and trail down on the floor. So you can get an idea of the amount of birds that you're needing. And those are usually worn in our part of the country. They're worn by the male dancers over their eyes. You want to cover their eyes, and they undulate. They're constructed so they kind of roll, and I don't know how to explain it, but they undulate. It's really cool. And that then is something on your head over your eyes. You have this feather, this net on your head. Sometimes that's filled with down that kind of drifts out. You have that so you can stick these again, kind of dance plumes, they call them, these head plumes, feather plumes into your hair. And then there's this sort of bundle on the back. So all of this has to sort of, it's what helps hold it all together. And, you know, you're doing a lot of shaking of your head and moving around. It needs to be secure. And again, all meant to move. So this is kind of two different styles of those flicker bands. The one on top is Maidu, so you can see some stylistic differences. You know, the ends of the feathers are, you know, much thicker. It's actually not any more of the shafts. It's just that they've left many more of the ends of the feathers showing. And you could see how people are patterning. So they're using some that have darker shafts and some that have that golden shafted flicker to make these patterns in the headdress. The one on the bottom is Pomo. So we tend to be more spare, and so we've cut away most of those end of the feathers and kind of left this nice diamond pattern. And you see those clamshell disc beads and the little quail plumes. That's where you have ties attached, so you can tie that around and hold it onto your head. It sort of attaches right about there. These are from the Brooklyn Museum again. These are just different kinds of sort of male ceremonial regalia. This is Maidu, you know, kind of one of the most spectacular dances, and Pomo people do this too, is the big head dance. And if you imagine this huge kind of dandelion puff, that's kind of what I think it's most like. You have this, you know, great sort of fan of feathers around your face. Then you have these very long, thin, flexible kind of wands with little tufts of feathers at the end. And so you end up with this huge circular sphere of little feathers around your head that are moving. And, you know, when you see, to get an idea of how big these are, because when you put this on now, all of a sudden you're like 6 to 8 feet across. So when the big heads come in to the dance house, usually they're backed up, and you could kind of, somebody helps them and they sort of push them all together so they can get through the tunnel and, you know, come out and dance. And this is sort of a cheesy illustration, but what is really kind of missing is the music. Usually these are the dances that are done like 2 or 3 in the morning. So, you know, you're, in some sense, the whole idea is to take you to another place. So you're inside the ground. You know, you can actually feel the reverberation in the earth and against the walls where you're sitting. You just have firelight. You're kind of tired. You know, you're just sort of transported. The whole idea is to be transported into another world, and it's hard to explain. But all of this works together. Oh, sorry. The women's headdresses. So again, this is something that you tie on your forehead, and it dangles down in front of your eyes. And these are what we would call flicker flags. These are little pieces, little sections, that kind of orange squares. They're little sections of flicker quills. Again, you could see how they're patterned and they project forward. So it's not flat. It's very, again, 3-dimensional and moving all the time. And you wear feather top knot on. There are all sorts of feathers are used for this. A feather top knot on your head. This is again from Russia. It's some sort of a duck. Never seen one with using these feathers before, but it gives you an idea how those are made. You just make a feather strip, very, very long, and then you roll it up, and then you tie it to each other and onto a wooden hoop, and then when you turn it over, everything just falls around it like a fan and moves. And so, this is how the ladies look. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was, again, in exhibits, often you want to see the whole outfit. Usually I'm always seeing pieces. And so, which is true in like this outfit, this exhibit here, it's like, if you can, it's great to show everything together because that's what is the intent. So I love this. This is Cara Romero's work, who's a native California photographer. And this is, all the regalia is made by Leah Mata, who's Chumash. And that's her daughter, Naomi. So this is the name of the piece is Naomi, and Cara Romero did a series of photographs of what she called First American Indian Girls, which is a play on, the American Girls Dolls series. So it kind of gives the lesson about, having everything. You need everything together, your outfit. And I guess the other question I wanted to kind of raise that we can talk about or concern sometime is the regalia is, and we talk about this, is a living thing. And it's always constantly being taken care of in some ways that are spiritual, in some ways that are hands-on practical. So this is actually my daughter, Rachel, who is helping me on an exhibit where the museum had a feather cape that a number of the feathers in it were worn away, and so she's replacing those feathers so it looks right when it's on, when people see it. And I'm going to stop, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Thank you. So this is María Olvido Moreno Guzman, who graduated from the National School of Conservation and has a PhD in art history from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She is currently conducting interdisciplinary research on feather objects housed in museums across Mexico, Europe, and Japan. And at the same time, she's analyzing depictions of feather clothing in mural paintings. And you had an internship here, or you? Yes. And is excited to be back, I know.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I will start with Inspired by Alejandra Echevarri-Tuck, because she said that humans, we love birds a little bit more when they behave like us. And I remember when I was very young, my father's name is Moreno. And my father's father was Dr. Moreno, and the father's father is Dr. Moreno, etc. So this family of doctors, at least before my father, they never worked in a hospital. They always had their own practice room. And my grandmother, Aurorita, she had a parrot. And this family were one of the first families that had a phone at home. Ring, ring, hello. And my grandmother always say, La casa del Doctor Moreno, Dr. Moreno's house. And then a few years later, when we arrived and the parrot was there, we ran, La casa del Doctor Moreno. So I agree, and we love that parrot so much. So I agree with that. When Helen asked me to participate in this important event, and I am so happy to be here, with this topic, I thought about three things. That her hands are as delicate as feathers, that she could well have been an amanteca, we will know what amanteca word means later, and how to synthesize the information that I have gathered over more than 4 decades in 10 minutes. As you must remember, we have 2 main Mesoamerican traditional techniques in our feather art, mosaic and tie or knot feathers. Today, I will refer just to the first one, but I must say that with these 2 techniques, in the Mesoamerican world, we had a whole feathered universe. In a few words, the mosaic technique consists of gluing feathers or fragments or feathers onto a surface, usually flat. To achieve intricate designs, the components are first prepared separately and then assembled like a puzzle, as we see in this more than 20 layers example. Now what name for these defensive weapons is chimal. The surface of these 3 Aztec shields, which are preserved in public museums in Europe, was decorated with the mosaic technique. The pre-Columbian mosaic technique was adopted and adapted as an evangelization strategy by the friars. Over 3 centuries, masterpieces of Christianity were manufactured in New Spain workshops. During the 19th century, possibilities opened to include civil iconography, romantic countryside moments, and allegorical topics with European influence. In many cases, feather mosaics were combined with other painting techniques such as oil, pastel, or watercolor. In the 19th century, in addition to religious subjects, nationalist themes prevailed, and traditional characters and scenes took a leading role, some of them using prints as a support. The examples we have seen up to this point show us that the mosaic technique has extraordinary expressive possibilities. In all cases, the feather papers were cut and applied in several layers. As we can see, the arrangements was carried without millimeter accuracy. Featherwork in Mexico almost disappeared between the 19th and the 20th centuries. It was reduced to postcards and cardboard souvenirs made with feathers dyed with artificial dyes fixed with salt. Birds, as we can see, were the favorite motifs. Few amantecas born in the first half of the 20th century are committed to feathers. They resist the death of the tradition that they respect and love. Since the 1980s, the Mexican government's public and private universities, cultural institutions, banks, and galleries have made big efforts to motivate artisans, organizing contests, exhibitions, and workshops. On the internet, it is possible to learn more about these activities, and for me now it's impossible to name all of them. But go and type Plumaria Mexicana Mosaicos, and tons of activities will come on your screen. The procedures and materials in the mosaic technique have changed over time. Nowadays, in featherwork classes taught in museums, workshops, and cultural centers, students are trained to work only on a flat surface with Campeche wax as an adhesive. Only advanced students use undyed feathers. They do not work layer by layer. However, today's amantecas, a manteca is the now word to name the feather artisans, achieve vast production with a wide selection of themes. Shields are some of the favorites. They are very popular among the population as they represent the glorious pre-Hispanic past and the defensive against the Spanish. Other objects with Mesoamerican designs, such as fans and banners, have also been inspiration for new interpretations. In this shield, the butterfly motif was inspired on a stone relief. Guillermo Lai also applied turquoise mosaic and jade beads. The combination of these three precious materials reminds us the use of luxury materials with high symbolic values in Mesoamerica. Replicas of colonial pieces, mainly with religious images, are also popular. This is a good example to emphasize that colonial objects were made with thousands of overlapping layers. Today, these entire images are done only on a single surface. The visual effect of mimicking the iridescence is achieved with the use of millimeter feathers from different species of hummingbird. I cannot fail to mention the Virgin of Guadalupe. In fact, in the Vatican art collections, there is a feather mosaic of this Lady of Mexico that my teacher, Gabriel Olay, made about 45 years ago. Making feather mosaics versions of works by recognized artists is another common practice that, in the words of Amantecas, exalts the beds of Mexico by uniting two artistic traditions. This famous mural by Diego Rivera measures more than 50 meters in length, and its nationalistic iconography has also inspired contemporary feather mosaics, no matter if the portrait is of the Lady of the Dead. Many of you know this second example of mural painting that Rufino Tamayo did for the National Museum of Anthropology. It is placed at the main lobby. It welcomes you. This work gives a special symbolism as it is located in the place where the best pre-Columbian art in Mexico is preserved. Considering the importance of silver art production in Mexico, silver jewelry decorated with feathers is another important contemporary expression. In recent years, we can consider like a fashion expression. For amantecas of the 20th and the 21st centuries, portraying the heroes who gave us freedom, representing monuments, national symbols, or emblematic places, reflects a triple pride. On the one hand, the manual skills of handling such a rare and delicate raw material, of course, the feathers. On the other hand, keep alive the images of identity to finally affirm that they are the guardians of this Mexican art with at least five centuries of existence. Amantecas know they are part of our art history. The reality is that new techniques are far removed from the traditional feather mosaic. Based on Sandra Rosenthal concepts, we can say that this symbolic imagination and aesthetic archaeological personality of Amantecas is a practice in which the traditional technical aspect have been actually lost. I do not mean to rate the work of contemporary Amantecas, among which I appreciate some very good quality pieces. My purpose in this presentation is to share with you first-hand information on the evolution of Mexican featherwork. Those of us, Renee, Melanie, and Laura, who have had the privilege to learn about the techniques of ancient Amantecas by studying the pre-Hispanic and colonial Mexican featherwork, now we have the duty to share this knowledge with the contemporary generation of feather artisans, like Carlos. And in this way, featherwork tradition will preserve for further generations. One last thought. Let's hope that in the future, the contemporary Mexican feather art will continue to be appreciated as we appreciate now 19th century pieces. Look at the prices. Hope they will have a positive impact on the economy of the creators. Ellen, your book is always in my table in my classes. Thank you very much.
Is this on? Great. So you're going to have to ask a lot of questions because it's just the two of us, but we'll start. So I have a question for you. So it sounds like one of the, you've been learning featherworking techniques, Mexican featherworking techniques, and studying older pieces. What is the, would you say the biggest difference is the fact of the layering of the older techniques, the layering of the feathers, if I have it understood right, versus being put down in single layers today?
Can you hear me? Yes? For the knotting and tying techniques that were mainly used for regalia and clothing and headdresses, etc. Excuse me? Like this? Okay, but yeah. For the knotting and tying techniques, that those were used for regalia and headdresses and capes and all that, those techniques I could say that are 99% lost, you know? They are such a challenge. It takes a big amount of time to reproduce them, and we will see that in Carlos' talk. And you know, like now people that dress up with these ancient customs or designs, they just do not have all the materials and the time and the experience and the knowledge to reproduce. So tying and knotting is like lost. But for the mosaic technique, as you could see, we have now like a boom of productions. And we have a few differences. One is the fact that they do not construct puzzles, the mosaic in parts, layers. They just use one single surface. Another change is the glue. As far as we know and as far as we have identified, in ancient times, Amantecas use an adhesive that comes from the bulb of an orchid. The name in Nahuatl is Sautli. And we have other colleagues that are studying that material in very deep and multidisciplinary works. Nowadays, since 19th century, they use Campeche wax, which is a wax that comes from the bees. And it is a very good material. And we have pieces made, glued with wax from 19th century that they are well preserved. So that's another big difference. So, and the third could be the support. Before, they mainly use copper, yes, for like the support. And nowadays, they mainly use amate paper, which is from a ficus. So those are like the big differences. And I could say that even though, after all you saw that we have passed through centuries, it's an alive expression, even though. I have so many. But we'll go to your slides later, and then maybe we can, yeah, because it's really many and quite technical.
So are there questions from the audience?
Yes. Maria, you told us about the concept of Susi Rosenthal. Can you tell us more about it, please?
Yes. Sandra Rosenthal has built many nice and interesting and deep concepts, and I like this one a lot. Like, she says that every Mexican has an archaeological deep personality, and that we cannot avoid that, because in our daily life, what we eat, the way we behave, and our art, like these expressions, the feather art, we always have in our minds, and I say we because I do too, this glorious idea of the perfect paradise pre-Hispanic time, you know? And so she said, Mexicans, we all have our deep archaeology inside our mind, our soul, and we cannot avoid. And I think that that applies really deep for the Amantecas. If you have an interview with an Amanteca, with a Mexican Amanteca, he will always say, I do the same that they did in pre-Hispanic times. My reference is Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, and I follow him. And I do, you know, like in the ancient workshops. So it's like they always like refer this glorious past as a perfect idyllical time, and that's why I refer that, because I see that quite clear when I work and teach this practice. Thank you.
I have a question for both of you, actually. The first question is for Maria. In the beginning of your PowerPoint, you showed a circular disc that was labeled chalice cover.
Yes.
So at LACMA, we have a chalice, 17th century chalice, that has all these hummingbird feathers, just like you showed in the jewelry. And I'm wondering if, in fact, when it was first made, it would have had a chalice cover made out of feathers, as you showed in your PowerPoint, and those things became dissociated in time. And if that is true, do you know of any chalices that have such a feathered cover that have survived?
Okay. Thank you very much. What a question. Okay. This object was found in the middle of the 20th century. And the name comes from the way it was found, because it was inside a box, and that box contained a chalice. That's why they said it is. We are not sure if this el disco, this circle, this disc piece object, was used to cover this chalice. We have, but we do not know. The name comes from the fact and the way it was found. And the second thing we must analyze is that all around it is cut. It doesn't have its original size. Laura Fillol, our dear Mexican colleague, she studied this piece more than us. And she proposes that, like a hypothesis, of course, that this could be the central part of a chimali, of a shield. Yeah. So, because it is cut, and one important topic is that it was, at some point, we don't know when, glued on a black cloth. And we cannot unglue because it's quite delicate. So we have no idea what was in the back, because I imagine that if we could unglue it and see the back side, maybe if it was part of a shield, we can see the stamp of the support, for example, that are quite typical of the Mexica shields. So I would, and in another hand, we have, for example, in Italy, this cover chalice that it's a square one, and it was made on 18th century. It has, the feathers were sewn, they are not glued, and it's part of the infulas, the cape, and the mitra. It's a complete set. It's the only example we have of the cover chalice. It's square and it's part of this set. So I think we must keep researching and doing more work to go deep on all these feathers, on all these objects.
Because if you think about chalices that are used by priests in Catholic ceremonies, typically when the chalice is put down, it's a white cloth that has a square shape and it's draped over it. So that would be right in keeping with that Christian practice.
Yes, but in another hand, it is also very interesting, the iconography study of this. And it has been like, if it is a Tlaloc, the face of Tlaloc, the god of the rain, or if it was described at some moment like a monster, etc. But the main, let's say, I vote for the interpretation that says that it represents currents of water, and a piece of land with the koa to work the land. So it's maybe a piece devoted to agriculture and rain. So that's another topic. See, the fact is that it's so beautiful. It has more than 20 layers. It was made mainly the blue with Cotinga amabilis feather, which was a secret bird in pre-Hispanic times. So we must keep studying this object.
I think I'll put our curator in touch with you.
Yes, please.
Okay, my other question is for Sherrie. In your presentation, you showed a cape, black feathers, front and back. Is that sort of fishnet? Is that a Brooklyn piece?
No, that piece is from Russia.
I see. And the one at the end of your presentation, which was the Brooklyn piece that was the hat with the thing, I do believe I treated that during my internship with Ellen Pearlstein. But I also treated a cape that's just like the one that you showed. The difference in the feathers, if I remember correctly, it was a black feather with a white feathered tip to it. Yeah. And I treated it by re-knitting all the barbules back together again and then cleaning them, because those feather, particularly the hat, when I was cleaning it, all these crystals of arsenic just effloresced all over the place. And I took samples to the Met for analysis, And I did treat that one in my intention. Thanks very much.
Thank you both so much for your presentations. You both touched on this a little bit, but I wondered if you could speak a little bit about the relationship of the origin of the meaning of the bird itself and the transformation of the human with relationship to the bird. So this seemed quite perhaps straightforward if you think about the condor, in which case now the human who wears the condor, the raven, is embodying aspects of the bird. And the waterfowl that is able then perhaps to move across the water in a canoe or whether as a swimmer. And for María, even the question that was just asked of you about the hummingbird feathers inside the object that is known as the Hearst chalice. So many early Christian sermons translated into indigenous languages take the indigenous language to express the belief that we raise up like the hummingbird, we soar to the heavens. So is it possible, do you think, to generalize about that the maker is always thinking about the bird? Is this something that is characteristic of both Mexico and California and perhaps elsewhere as well, that the maker is attentive to the bird in the meaning and use and deployment of the object?
So I guess the way I would answer that is, yes, the maker and the wearer, the user, is in relationship, but it's not just to the bird as a bird. More importantly, so many of our I'm going to go back to our part of our origin story. It's the time when, before humans, how humans come into the world, but there were all these other beings. And I was always told some of the oldest of the beings were the bird people, which was very interesting when I found out decades later that they were related to dinosaurs. Birds were related to dinosaurs, which I would never have thought of. But we were always told some of the oldest beings were the bird people. And, our creative figure for us the creator was Golden Eagle. And working with Coyote, who wanted people. So it was Coyote's idea. Golden Eagle didn't think it was such a good idea. But Coyote persisted. Mainly he whined very annoyingly. And finally Creator said, yes, I'll show you how to make people if you'll just leave me alone. And people were made when Coyote was told to get a certain kinds of feathers from different birds, bird people. And we have this whole story of where he put the feathers, very specific places. And those, in our story, it's all of our neighbors. And the feathers symbolize something about the character. This is really very human. We all we have our stereotypes. So it's our stereotypes of our neighbors. So, for example, Kashaya people were made from the acorn woodpecker feather. And we always say they make the best acorn mush. That's why. People down in Windsor, sort of a little to the south, they were made from the feather of the red-winged blackbird, which if you've been around red-winged blackbirds, they're very noisy, chattery. We're always like those people, they talk way too much, It's very annoying. So there's this, sort of everybody has their place and their stereotype. And we, of course, were made from, people in Dry Creek, we were made from the feathers of mourning dove. And mourning dove, if you know that song, it's a very, we're told that, our characteristic is we talk slow, we do things slowly, have a nice sort of soft sound, but we always get it done. So that's our story. So there's stories of, there's a story of how Raven's feathers turned black. Raven is the one that brought fire to people, and that was the result of that journey. People I know down in kind of near Santa Cruz area, the Amamutsan, they talk about fire coming, hummingbird bringing fire. So there's all of these stories about all of these cultural heroes, I guess, cultural things that are important in human history, being associated. Birds kind of are their embodiment, but it's more than just the bird now. So part of what you're trying to do is go back to this earlier time. So I don't know if that helps or not.
I think, Ellen, I think I'm not prepared to answer 100% your question because I'm not an anthropologist and because I should have more information from the California work than to be able to compare and to link or to take different ways. But as a conservator, many times during my career, I think on that point exactly. How, because I am not an amanteca, but I do things with feathers. I would not consider myself an amanteca. But I like to work with feathers and to teach and to apply techniques and replicate. And so constantly when we think about the thousands, 12,000, 24,000 feathers, one object required, and that all those feathers had to be the same size, the same length, same shape, in a good condition or whatever, and all the productive chains it takes from the raw material to collect, to storage, to select, to apply, until we have the final product. We have different people in each step working specialized. So I think for some of them, this close relation with the birds through the management of the feathers. In some steps, maybe it was not like that. Maybe it was just a job, a task. But I think for the final steps, the meaning came deeper. For the first steps, just if we think the care, the package, the transportation, the care on storage, like maybe they were more worried about taking care of this precious treasure, symbolic material, than on the final product. But even though from the from the very first steps, the relation is close, and as we progress on the operational chain at the end of the object, I think we come closer to this relation with not just with the bird, but with all the meanings that each bird should have. And I think they never lost the final product and the one who's going to use it. A warrior, a priest, an emperor. So that also was like, this who's going to wear it. where it will be. So I think it's like different in each step, depending on the procedure or the part of the procedure we are. And another thing that I've been thinking often is that we are so used to handle these rare examples that because of the gold and the number of feathers and the meaning and the size and blah, blah, we consider like luxury objects, the four shimalis, the headdress, even the tapacalis or whatever. But we know we have the baladi, the not precious, not luxury, but the common feather objects. That also should mark a difference, I think, And we know about all these different categories of amantecas, those that were for the army, for the warriors, those for the private, those for Huitzilopochtli, whatever. But even though maybe this make a difference on the treatment of the raw materials, like these are baladi feathers. But it's not as simple, because as we know, some precious objects have dye feathers on inside and then on the top, the precious feathers. So I think that these workshops were extremely well organized, and each amanteca, each worker, had a specific task, and they were committed to each step to achieve these extraordinary objects that I could say. And another thing is that this is a question we always have. Did amantecas really manage all deep symbolism, or we had those specialists in religions directing hands? And how was that reached? I don't have that answer, but I always like to think about it. I'm not sure if it is okay.
Hello, hi, Sherrie. I just wanted to comment on the condor cape that you talked about, and the way in which the backside was held together or woven to a net. What's fascinating is that birds have the ability to raise their feathers, but also the necessity to keep their feathers from flying around. So just imagine, and mammals have this too. We have, hair erector muscles, which, a dog or a cat when it's afraid, or when you're cold. So goosebumps, right, are the remnant of those little muscles, irrelevantly raising our fur to make us warmer, but we don't have any fur left, right? My favorite, elementary school example of evolution, and every kid will understand. But the birds have muscles that raise the feathers and muscles that hold the feathers down during flight, so they don't fly around like our hair in a convertible car, right? But if you look at that on the skin, if you take the skin of a bird and turn it upside down and look at the inside, it's arranged, like you said, shingles on a house, but it's actually kind of in makes a hexagonal array. They're alternating. And the feathers have muscles in the skin, intrinsic to the skin, that are connected, erector and depressor muscles. And they form a net shape, exactly like the one that they're attaching to. And you talked about how they move as the dancer moves. This seems almost like obviously informed by an understanding of skin, bird skin, right, and its relation to the feathers. And that was really beautiful to see.
And I was going to say, if you ever get a chance to see some of the dances, people are mimicking some of what birds do, and you'll see some of the behavior of the birds sort of in that as well.
Yeah. There are a few examples of feathers that are long and pendant, that when the bird moves, they actually woggle around, in the air, right? And I saw those hats that had the long little white spots on long fibers. What's the material that those long pieces are made of?
Yeah, usually they're made of really kind of springy, very slender sort of shoots from different plants. When wire became available, sometimes not so much those long ones and the big heads, but some of the dance ones started to use wire because they have that really sort of bounce to them that moves the feathers around in interesting ways.
Yeah, the feathers that have this, they have to evolve a rachis or a shaft that has a particular shape and material composition so that they woggle rather than being, unresponsive. Yeah, thank you.
Sherrie, two questions to you. As a conservator, I've been working at the Ethnological Museum in Berlin and taking care there for the Pomo collection for more than 2 decades. So one thing they told me is that for this very precious baskets that are there in the holdings, sometimes they used around 200 birds. Question, is this true? Second question, they have models there, a size of 1/2 inch, where they told me that the elders have been doing these little models to make the younger generation understand how the techniques work. And they were just as this size. And I never could understand how you can do this. And my question is this information true? And if it is it still practiced in these days of Pomo?
So if I want to make sure I understood that last question right, so you're talking about mini baskets?
Yes, mini baskets, small models.
Yeah, and feathered particularly, or just in general?
No, just basket material.
Okay, yeah, so kind of going to the first question, so easily hundreds of birds in a full-size feather basket. Part of it is the fact that you're only using, it's not like you're using the whole skin of a bird, you're just using, patches, I guess I would say, of color normally, or just like quails, just they have like 3-4 feathers at the most on their heads, so you're running through birds there pretty fast. And, again, it gives you a picture of just the abundance of bird life that there was, that wasn't an issue. So you're going through a lot of birds, and often it's kind of usually those baskets are woven by women, but it's the men that are usually harvesting all of those birds, and often they're doing it with baskets that they have woven themselves. There's basket traps, actually, are a very efficient way to hunt. So it's kind of a collaborative effort. You can see, how much work has gone into just, like you're talking about, assembling the materials that is going to be needed to finish one of these. It's part of why they were so highly prized is, people recognized the effort that went into it, and it was, both men and women were involved in it, even though the final product was woven by the woman. A lot of the time necessary for it was by the men. And then in terms of the little mini baskets, so first of all, I have no idea how the ladies did it. And actually there are a few men that made, kind of mini baskets too, but they really started with, and they're all coiled, and they really started with this whole idea of Pomo baby baskets. They have you kind of spend a lot of time as a baby in your basket, and you're sort of confined a little bit. And so one of the things people do is they would hang, there's this hoop that protects your head, and they would hang things from that hoop, and it kind of is about eye level. So they're like crib toys. They help the baby to focus their eyes and gives them something to look at and play with. But it was also seen as important in the development of the child, some characteristics that they might acquire because they're spending so much time around this object. So people chose, what it was that they put to sort of encourage different things. So always you have usually money, clamshell disc beads or magnesite, because you want your child to go up and become rich so they could take care of you. But, a lot of times there'll be different things hanging for boys or for girls depending on, different roles that men and women play. And so one of the things often that got hung on girls' baskets were these little mini baskets that were made because it was an important skill as a woman. So much of how you provided for your family involved all of these baskets that you made to harvest food, cook food, all of these processed food, all of these things. So that's really the start of the little small baskets. And then when the market came along, non-native collectors were very competitive, and there just started to be this fad for how small can you go, and it kind of took off from there.
Thank you so much for this.
So, of course, thank you for those glorious talks. But I have a question actually for both of you. So, clearly the primacy of the feathers, the importance, real significance of the feathers, you both really talked about this, in terms of these two different cultural traditions. I'm just curious, how has bird extinction and endangerment influenced current practice? Because both of you talked about, María talked about now, people doing Diego Rivera murals and contemporary amantecas. And I'm curious, what birds and feathers can they access? And then also, Sherrie, we know that Pomo and Maidu and Miwok are still very much performing with this regalia. And so I'm just curious, I know we'll probably get to this a bit further on too in our program, but I'm just curious, what bird, are the same birds being accessed? Are very different birds being accessed? Is that changing anything about the characteristics? Because the birds are so important. So, thanks.
Unfortunately, we do not have the same birds. Ecosystems, we are destroying many, many ecosystems, and when we destroy the ecosystem, we destroy the home of the birds. So no way to have quetzal, cotinga, platalea, no way. Because of the destruction of the ecosystems, and also because of these destructions, now we have regulations, the law. So the law appears, so impossible, for example, in the aviaries, each quetzal tail, long, male, feather quetzal has an inventory number, for example. Now we take care and we have an inventory. So, of course, those precious birds that are described on sources in 16th century and that they don't exist. Talk in general for big birds. Another topic is hummingbird and hummingbird species. That's another topic. Because many of those, they have endangered nomination, but they exist. But it's always the same story. And now hummingbirds became like fashion, as you could see on the contemporary mosaics. Many of them are made. So people's like learning about hummingbirds, harvesting hummingbirds, having gardens with the specific flowers so they can eat, because they have to eat every 15 minutes. So they are not like catching them, but they are like providing the right because they arrive they can live in the countryside, but they can live in the cities. So and they wait, their period life is around average 5 years. So they wait for the season, for the migration, so when they know they are old enough, maybe they keep them, etc. So it's been like between nature, the law, the transformation of ecosystems, and what I can say is that nowadays Amantecas use what they have. What they get buying legally on internet, what they can buy in the markets, what they have these small colorful biopigment, small birds, so they feed them with special food, so they get these colors. Of course, later on, we lose that color on the mosaics. That's another problem. But the answer is they use what they have firsthand now by internet. That's a fact, unfortunately.
So yes, in California we have also laws and a loss of numbers of birds and species becoming more and more endangered. And the Endangered Songbird Act is pretty early, so I'm not sure exactly when, but that's been in place for a while. So for the baskets, people have used other, mallard ducks, fine, you could still hunt. But quail the same way, but some of the other birds, people use pheasant feathers. They've moved on to some sort of ones that are kind of raised domestically and commercially. I know Elsie Allen, who was a more contemporary weaver, somebody commissioned her to make a feather basket using their parakeet that had died. That was a way to remember the bird. I mean, people have kind of substituted dyed feathers, a lot of chicken feathers and duck feathers and kinds of things. So a variety of ways. I'm hoping Bradley will talk some about this, but the reintroduction of the condor, I think the fact that people remember, even when the birds have disappeared, they remember their importance, they remember that relationship, they remember that, they have the regalia still. I think tribes in California are doing some amazing environmental restoration work, and some of these relationships that we're talking about and use of those birds is actually what's helping to spur their reintroduction, and hopefully they're growing, their populations will grow in the future. And the other thing I'd say is more and more my friends I know, we all drive around with plastic bags and gloves, and one of the best ways to harvest birds is if they run into windshields, unfortunately, of cars, and you'll see them on the side of the road, and if we can, we always want to use them just as a way to honor that sacrifice in part. So
thinking about Alejandra and all of us, and in all this nowadays ambience and things that are going on all around the world, we are like having new relationships, because of this, like a reaction. So, for example, at El Nido, it's a private aviary not far from Mexico City. It is in Mexico City, but it's on the east side of the city. They are proud because they were, Dr. Jesus Estudillo was the first one and his son on having reproduction and captivity of quetzal. And at some point, they had like a population, but they have babies with the brother, with the sister, with the cousins, and it's quite endemic. And because they are in a huge cage, but it is a cage, after decades, they come with certain specific, no very well done quetzals. I don't know how to say that, you know. And some of them that now cannot fly as fast. They don't look for food because they know they have it there. So they establish contact with another aviary in Guatemala. So they can like exchange ladies and men, and, you know, like mix the genome, the genetic of these quetzals. But that, again, we have the law that we cannot move the quetzal from the country. Excuse me, we are going to have better quetzals, you know. So they are fighting against these legal procedures just to exchange genetics with, for example, that is one example. Or the other example that we are facing now is we are trying to make 16th century replicas of specific objects that are possible because they are from aras, ara Macao, ara militares, or whatever. So we contact a private park, amusement park, and we're working and everything's going well, but also a new relationship, you know. Visitors come and they love to see them and they feed them quite often. They are a little bit fat. They are lazy to fly because they know everything is around. So we are like, I mean, we are terrible.
Organizer. But I think if it's okay, we're going to break for lunch. And sorry, I'm standing here because it's closer. But we're going to give you a round of applause first. And I don't know about all of you, I'm loving these cross currents because I think now with Alejandra and with Rick and with, I mean, we really just, it's all coming together in a very exciting way. But we're going to break for lunch, and there's going to be lunch on the outside patio, right outside the auditorium. And you can pick up your lunch and go anywhere outdoors at the Getty to enjoy. And we're going to reconvene at 2:15 promptly, if that's okay. So thank you all very much. Yeah.